So just, I think I mentioned this previously, but to mention it again, because this place is open all year round. The Phoenix Forge is the makerspace that's, part of Gateway Community College, but Maricopa County Community Colleges in general. And all current students have a Phoenix Forge membership. Okay, so you guys can go down there. There is, that's like schedule a tour. Yeah, there's the wood shop, metal shop, right? So the wood shop is huge. Do they not have pictures on the website? What is the deal? Wood shop, metal shop, 3D printers, laser cutters, jewelry equipment. There's a bunch of electronic stuff, and then there's some textile things. I've never seen anyone really using any of that. But yeah, here's a little bit better picture. Yeah, so they got 3D printers. The wood shop is huge. Laser cutters. And so in order to use any of the stuff, you just need, right? Regular people need to pay a monthly membership. Students do not. The only thing you need to do is take the safety orientation class for whatever it is you want to do. And once you make an account and sign in, the orientation classes are like $50 or something. But then after that, you're able to use it whenever you want, or whenever you can schedule it. You have to schedule, once you're a member, then you can schedule stuff in their calendar and reserve time in the wood shop or the metal shop or the prototyping area or whatever.
Are you in class?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, I thought this was Glenn was doing tutoring in here.
Down in the pit down there.
Yeah.
Right now the workstation is taken. But I'll be there in, I want to say about 10, 15 minutes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So everybody has access to that, which is great. And then did you see, we're going to have a wood shop and some of the prototyping stuff here. Fall scheduled for fall 2026. So you guys may be done by then, but the I3 building up next to fire science and EMT, you may have noticed it got demolished yesterday. Like they took the whole thing down in one day. I was like, wow. And that is where they're going to be building our new version of this. The STEAM Center is the working title for the building now. But there'll be 3D printers, laser cutters, and a pretty big wood shop there. And then a classroom like this one, but it's going to be more focused on VR stuff with headsets at each center, each computer, and space to do VR development. And we're going to be building the VR stuff into all the other classes. So that'll be super fun. Again, scheduled for fall 2026, but it's a construction project, so we'll see. Okay, let's take a look at everybody's. Elena. Awesome, Lena. That's nice. Super fun way to do this. The robot lifting up the other one, and really cool way to integrate the title into it. Yeah, you got the kind of minimalist background thing going on, but it really sets the stage and it really allows us to look at, focus on what's going on with the main characters. Motion blur really helps because you did move some things pretty quickly, but that looks good because you've got the motion blur on there. The only thing that, there's a few things, the light angle is a little weird that it's like way off to this side, creating this like long shadow. That looks just a little bit, I don't know, awkward. Not huge, but the light, I think it's the sunlight, and so I would rotate the sunlight more up so that our shadows, aren't quite as long. I mean, we're used to this being the kind of lighting that would happen outside because it's unavoidable outside when the sun is low in the sky in the morning or in the evening. But like inside, it's not the kind of thing you would normally see. And so there's that. And then maybe turning up the distance on the shadowing to sort of soften the shadows just a touch. But it's a pretty minor detail. Cool. And the ending's great. This one, in order to sell this as being heavier, right? The only thing I would say here is maybe it comes down, just does a little bit of, one or two, not bounces, but just a heavy thing would just sort of whoosh, whoosh a couple times just to sort of fall in place. It sort of falls a little too cleanly, where it's just like clearly two keyframes, one up here, one down here. The speed of it looks good, but in order to sell it being a heavier thing would be good. Great use of the wireframe modifier. That's super cool, right? Because then it casts this long, strange shadow over here. Yeah. And then this last camera move, like pulling out to reveal your name, that's well done, super cool. The only thing here is that, why do I tell you, I insist on the linear keyframes when the camera is moving, because that's the case where we animate in a linear fashion right up until it cuts to a new shot, and then maybe the camera is animating in a different direction, right? Or a lot of times the camera just doesn't move. And so we never, because the animation proceeds at the same speed up until the edit, we never see the camera change direction if we follow those rules. And by the same token, we don't see a linear animation for a camera stop and then have an edit. And so that's what you did here at the end, which to my eye, I would tell you to fix, right? And so in this case, you have two options. You could either have the camera continue to pull back throughout the last shot here, or this would be a case where having the camera ease in, right? This would technically be an ease out. So the curve would end up looking like this, right? So that then it would be there. So it would sort of slow down into that last spot. But you wouldn't want to ease into it for the reasons I've explained umpteen times, where we don't want to see the camera start slow and end slow at the beginning and end of every shot. And here we could start and then just ease in to that final position. So either one of those would be a solution for this last shot here. Alicia, what do you think? Something you liked and a suggestion?
After the cage falls onto the robot's like, but then like the zoom out, the robot stops moving. So just add some extra movement to the robot.
Yeah. Yeah, it sticks out because you've done such a good job of creating, right? What's the whole name of the game here? The name of the Disney book? Illusion of Life, right? It wasn't even something I was explicitly saying, right? Because it was obvious that the robot was a sentient thing because of the way the robot was moving the whole way up until there at the end. And so, yeah, what could the robot do here at the end? You know, like there's the initial sort of like jaw drop thing, which is funny, but then, you know, either the robot, like, I don't know, poking at the cage or maybe like grabbing it and trying to rattle it or just like, you know, pacing back and forth, something. It just sticks out here because you did such a good job in the rest of it, right? So like I said before, if a character's on stage, having it totally freeze is almost never the right, you know, move here, unless they've been like shot by a freeze ray or something like that. And so, yeah, something there would make sense. I think you did a good job picking sound effects. In general, I feel like the sound effect level could come down another 6 dB or something, and then we wouldn't be hearing the beginning and end of each individual sound effect quite so clearly. They came through pretty hot on the school sound system here, right, which is pretty loud, and I have it cranked or whatever. But all of these sounds are clear enough and loud enough and high frequency enough that they'll cut through what's going on with the music there. And so we can sort of hear them on the timeline because we hear one start and the next one stop. And if you have them turned up too loud, you'll hear the noise floor for the recorded sound effect kind of start and stop at the end of each one. And so if you just back it off a little bit, you can't really hear that anymore, and it works. The other thing that could work here is... Yeah, some sort of ambience in the sound design here. So there's that whole folder in that amount, in the ones I directed you to, the Adobe Audition sound effects of ambiences, and something just very soft so that when the music cuts out, when you stop the music and we just have sound effects, then you're in a situation where when the sound effect, in between sound effects, we have total digital silence. And that is really jarring. You can hear it. It sounds out of place because that never happens in the real world, right? There's always this ambient noise in the room, even if it's very, very low level. And so just taking one of those ambiences, and it probably isn't even loud enough that we even know what it is, whether it's a factory or a room or whatever, but some sort of like sound bed that's just there so that in between the sound effects on the timeline, it's not dropping. Right now, there's nothing in there and it drops off to digital silence. If you had this ambient bed underneath that was just very, very soft, in between the sound effects, that would sound a little bit better. I really like the sound effect for the tentacle. Yeah, and you did a great job with the visual storytelling. We obeyed the 180-degree rule here for the most part. I mean, you kind of cheated with the in the hole shot, but this really works, and it does a little bit of setting up the tentacle, right? In that we see that there, and so this totally works. The only other thing I can think of is in terms of extending it is like maybe, I mean, it is pretty quick. Like that very first ball, like maybe it lets it go and then there's like a delay till we hear it sploosh down as if the hole is very, very deep. That would do a little bit of storytelling there in terms of like, why is this hole so deep? What's in there? Because, yeah, I would say any faster and it would feel rushed. But it felt good to me. I thought it didn't seem rushed. It was just sort of solid sequential storytelling, which is really super well done. Okay, Logan, the one that's up here was Saturday. Is there a newer one?
Yeah, I sent it to you
In my email?
Yeah.
Let's watch it again. Nice. Super. Okay, so give us the play. What changed from the last one?
It was mostly just the sounds. I was like the sounds weren't all that there, like weren't all there, so I just adjusted it a lot of times. That's how I made it. That's how it turned out.
So, Autumn, tell me the story of what happens here.
So the robot picks up the ball, or is holding the ball. I never really, because he's just kind of holding it,
Uh-huh.
and then he moves forward a little. The tentacle emerges, scares the robot, and he's like, "Ugh," drops his ball, and I guess the tentacle has like a magical power, so it summons him like to put, and he slaps it, making a pan fall on him, and he falls onto the button again, and then he just sinks back down.
Is that right?
I'd say it's just about right. Although instead of that like magical power, like that was a good interpretation. I simply wanted him to like just press the button, but the robot was actually just gonna stop him before stop the tentacle before doing anything. But it didn't really work out.
I do like the robot, like, no, don't press it, but the tentacle pushes, like, I like that detail.
Yeah.
I am a little confused about the cause and effect. The button, in the teaser causes the pan to fall into the water, and then the same button causes it to fall on the robot, and then the third press, nothing happens.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I probably should have added a sound for that to indicate it, but I was thinking like the button probably broke when he fell on it.
Like, as much as it was nice seeing it like trying to cover it, it kind of just, how I interpret it, it looked like the tentacle went straight.
Yeah.
And so I thought he was like trying to command him to do, like push the button. If you had it like the arm curved like this, like trying to hide the button, or like grab it and then pull the button like away. That would have probably made it more, and then it reaches over and slaps it, making the pan fall on it.
Good idea. Yeah, that sounds more like cohesive.
Why does he have a ball?
That's why I was like, I don't know if he's holding the ball or did he pick it up when it was wiggly?
He's just holding the ball. I kind of wanted to add it in just simply for the parenting, like the child of, like, I simply wanted to add it for the child of feature, and that was about it. Like, there's no real purpose for the ball outside of like the, oh, they're so scared when they drop it. Like,
I have a funny idea if we were to ever reanimate this or want to. Have him, instead of him setting up what the button does, have him playing with the ball, and then when the button gets hit, have more balls just fall on him.
yeah, that's a good idea.
And you just add like the sounds of like a bunch of balls falling onto it instead of like a random pan. And so if you can have them like bounce it against the wall, kind of like how a racquetball is, do that, and then the tentacle can come up, and then he knows that has the ball button. Don't release my balls.
Yeah.
My balls.
Not the balls. But yeah, that's a good interpretation. That's a good idea. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, so I would say the ball thing needs to go. The part that the way it is now is just sort of inherently confusing the matter, right? And then, my typical advice to students is to really make everybody internalize the idea that there are no neutral design components or neutral design decisions when you're making a thing. That everything that's a component of the thing should support the message that you're trying, or the message you're trying to send, or the story you're trying to tell, right? Anything that is quote unquote superfluous or secondary, right? Or you thought it was just a thing, is not just a thing. It's in the negative category, because that's going to be something that detracts from us understanding the message you're trying to send or the story you're trying to tell, right? So if you were to interpret it that way, you should probably get rid of the ball, because it's just murkying, like, pun intended, murkying. Muddying? We'll go with muddying. Mercurying? That's not a word. Yeah, is murking a word? I don't feel like murking is a word either.
I feel like that is.
Yeah.
Sounds like a word to me.
Muddying the waters.
Muddying the waters is the actual saying, and like you don't have to really, try too hard to say that. So yeah, you're muddying the waters, pun intended, right? With the ball. However, like, I think the ball could be part of the storytelling in a more supportive way if he was doing something like just one or two, like throw the ball, catch it, like he's playing with the ball, then the tentacle, maybe like he throws it once, he catches it, he throws it the second time, the tentacle slaps it out.
Yeah, now that I think about it, maybe it could be like they bounce the ball and they try to catch the ball the second or third time or whatnot, and like it clips their hand, falls onto the button, and then something happens. It probably won't be the pan thing, because that's.
Well, I like the pan thing, and I think the pan thing would be fine as long as it was, you press button and pan falls, right? Like, because you did that once, you did it twice, and then at the end, I think that you're just missing the opportunity for yet another joke. Like when he collapses onto it at the end, he could get smacked by the pan a second time, right? That's just funny, right? Like he gets hit by the pan, then gets hit by the pan again, and so I think the pan button, as long as you would just do that the third time, then that would be consistent, it makes sense, and that would be fine. But it's the ball. Like if you just took the ball out and just did that, that would work, I would think. But if you want to keep the ball, I don't think you need to keep the ball in for that scared moment, because you did a really good job animating the hand shaking, and I think that would be clear to me that the hand was scared regardless of whether he dropped the ball or not. So either way, there. But yeah. Yeah, because it's a little bit murky right now. Like muddy. It's a little bit muddy in terms of like what the cause and effect of what's happening, right? The job you're doing, like the keyframing of the animation and the quality of motion for the different objects is good, really good. The only thing that stuck out there was there was a part where the tentacle freezes straight, which seemed very.
Oh, like, is it like when they're about to like hit the button?
Yeah, like it just.
For
It just seems unnatural for me for the tentacle to ever really assume this position. You know, like this totally, yeah, like it just doesn't seem, like this seems like there'll always be a little bit of bend to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that stuck out a little bit. But then, yeah. And then from a design thing, like when you outline the text on the big chunky letters that you hand drew for your logo, right? Like the one you used before your presentation videos, that looks okay from a design perspective. But for this kind of stuff, just don't outline the type. Like it's just a design. Don't, right? It kind of obscures the design of the font, and then something like this, we have just 3 things on screen. We would really want them to be left aligned, right? Like just, again, oh, you weren't, did you watch Monday? Were you watching the live stream? Not yet? Okay, well, like, because I talked to Andre about this, someone about this on Monday. Just in terms of typography, design decisions, I encourage everyone to just be boring, conservative here, right? Because if you do something that's a little bit strange, it really makes people call into question what's going on with the design skills there, right? We're all primarily image makers, and we want to focus on that. So, so yeah, don't outline this kind of type. For those super fat letters that you've hand drawn, for like hand drawn type, I think the assumptions about that kind of thing and the visual presentation of it are in a different category. Whereas like this kind of thing where it's just like such and such font on screen, in general, I tell people like, please do not outline the type in this instance. Is this like a piece of video overlay here of like rippling water?
Yeah, I just sort of duplicated that water puddle and then just flipped it over and aligned it with the camera.
Okay. And then did you use any of this sim stuff on the water? Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then like yours, part of the pan stuff would be more impactful with motion blur. I don't think we have any motion blur here.
Yeah, I realized, I was thinking to myself, like, as I was doing this out, like, I got this $100 and stuff, and then, like, more recently I was realizing, oh, dang, not the motion blur.
Right, we can tell, like, because you have a lot of high velocity objects like Lena did, right? But Lena's, quote unquote, look faster.
Because of the motion blur.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It blurred, like, the objects as well as motion.
Yeah, exactly. And specifically the pan here, although you may have to slow down the rotation speed of the pan, you'd have to look and see what the motion blur looks like for the pan, whether or not it's actually doing any rotational blur with the motion blur. You'd have to just turn on and see what it looks like. But yeah, I think you definitely want that. I mean, for my money, the pan could be slightly slower, right? I know you told me that's what the gag is, but if I only saw it once or twice and someone asked me what fell on these things, I'd have a hard time
Trying to
tell them what it is, right? Because like, yeah, like for me, it was really tough to tell. Like even if I'm freeze framing here,
Yeah, it does fall in really fast.
yeah, like,
Like, probably play it out and see how it.
Yeah, like there's a handle on it, right?
No, it's just like the shape. It's just.
Oh, it's just like a more like a bowl shaped thing. Okay, all right. So, yeah, and having it turn a little bit. I mean, you do that in the second one, doesn't it? Flip in the second one a little bit.
Yeah, this one I flipped in to make it like look a little more natural. Right. A little bit more.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, it just allows us to trace the path of it visually, right? When things are happening that quickly. So it could slow down a little bit, and then also, yeah, the motion blur is going to help that quite a lot there. And then, did you use the ocean deformer on the waves?
I believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, you probably want to turn down the scale so that so that the waves are smaller. It looks like the kind of waves for a much bigger body of water, and you'd want it to look more like a pool, because they're kind of like there's like massive tide shifting happening, which wouldn't really happen in something this small. So in Blender, it's like either the scale or the wave size or one of those parameters. You just want more tiny waves that are closer together. Cool. Yeah, so it's like I said, the quality of the animation, the individual movements is really nice. It's just sort of like the causality of the storytelling that gets a little muddy.
Yeah, I appreciate the criticism. Thank you guys.
Let's see. Efferents? Did we look at efferents? I don't think we did. Did we look at this one on Monday? Okay. Okay, first of all, really nice world building here, right? For not a lot of extra work, Efren really makes it seem like a real place just by just shift D'ing his stuff, right? These other arms probably aren't rigged or whatever, right? But if you just shift D the mesh over there, you can do a lot to, make it seem like a real place. And so he did that with the ball, the crates, the robot arms, well done. Great, let's watch it one more time. Great. That's good. I mean, I think you did a good job causality-wise here. The fact that the tentacle produces its own button to push is like really weird, but like funny. I don't know. I personally like that. I could see, someone else be like, "Why isn't the button there from the beginning?" But that was, I thought, funny. like you made it fit the quote-unquote requirement well by doing that. Logan, what do you think? Something you liked in a suggestion?
I would say, yeah, I really like. I especially like the extra button push, like the giant tentacle coming out. It honestly caught me by surprise. I'm just picturing like the tentacle just calling their mom on the robot. And then the tentacle just going to beat it up. And then maybe one thing I'd say say, I mean, like, to, like, the improvement, it's sort of like the animation, it seems like it goes down before it gets crushed, like, by the tentacle, like the robot arm. It's,
Okay. I honestly didn't catch that the first time. Yeah, but yeah, clearly when we frame by frame it there.
I wish there was more movement from the robot. It freezes after
Yeah.
moving the ball.
Yeah, yeah. Like again, the illusion of life ends for the robot, right? Like if when the tentacle came out, like the robot should react to the tentacle, like sort of laughing at him or taunting him or something like that, or
clenching its pincers.
yeah, literally anything kind of reaction would be good, and then some sort of some sort of reaction from the robot here, and then I would say a second distinct reaction when the button is pressed. Just a kind of thing would probably be enough, and then this I think could be set up once you cut to the wide with maybe like a robot arm back and forth, just kind of looking around. Just another good source for this. I'll have to link to that next time. The first Iron Man, he spends a bunch of time talking to robot arms in that one, and so there's a lot of good. Yeah, a lot of good notes to take there in terms of the anthropomorphizing just that one thing. But yeah, in terms of worrying about whether this actually, this mesh intersects that mesh, like you probably don't need any tweening for the robot arm. Like as long as we saw it get covered up by the big tentacle, and then when it went away, it was on the ground, like just simply 2 hold keyframes, like that would probably be enough as long as you timed it right on the smash. That would work. Yeah, this could be a little bit more visually impactful. I mean, it's good. Like the way you cut to the wide so that we could really see the environment and see the whole arm more. That was better. But it could be even more if this camera was a little bit lower and a little bit angled up and maybe pushed in with a even 5 less millimeter focal length. That would make the tentacle seem even more intimidating there, that like we're at ground level looking up at that thing. And yeah, for my money, there could be a beat, right? Tentacle rises up, then waits for a second, then smashes the thing, right? It's pretty quick with yours, just up, smash, down. So you could milk the timing of that a little bit more.
Part of me does kind of find it funny how like quick it like goes up to smash the robot, but I do wholeheartedly agree with the readability stuff from a readability standpoint.
Yeah, these things, like that's funny. I just think milking the timing for a project this short would be, perfectly fine, right? These things are all less than a minute long and everything, right? They did this gag on. Did you guys watch the Andor premiere last night? Yeah, there's a very quick, unexpected getting eaten by a monster that happens like out of nowhere within like, and the whole thing is done in like 5 frames, and you're like, oh, that's done, okay. And this was kind of like that. And then here, good job with the type selection. The only thing here is that I generally try to discourage people from having type animate over other type, right? That just sacrifices the readability of both things at the same time. And so if you want to have this come in from the top, you should have thank you for watching come in first, then animated by Efrentenna. And then in reality, get rid of thank you for watching. Okay, everybody, stop putting that on whatever it is that you're making. Like let's not, just stop doing it. Okay, so just, you know, you can just, again, here at the end, Efrentana. Cool. And in Blender, right, because don't we see it on the, when we cut? Yeah, okay, so here we see the shadow cast by the 3D type before we see the 3D type. In Blender, I think we can adjust that, right? If we have this object, object, shading, shadow. There we go. Okay, so here, object, shading, or no, sorry, object, visibility, uncheck shadows, right? Because, yeah, I think it maybe pushes it one step too far to have the title text, especially because we don't, like, your eye is drawn to this moving shadow over here, and you're like, what is that? Then the title comes in, you're like, oh, okay, that's what that is. But it's just not necessary. Nice job using the textures on the type. That's cool. I think that works. The only thing here is I would bevel these edges. Bevel the edges, right? So that this, it's going to be hard to make a metal surface look like metal without that beveled edge so that the edge can be shiny, right? It's kind of counterintuitive, but no bevel, perfectly sharp 3D edge will actually make it look not sharp and not shiny. So, but really good job building up the environment. It really gives it a sense of place. I just need to see, I mean, the number one thing here is the like more robot arm animation, so that we see an escalation of the behavior of both of them, as opposed to, you know, this kind of does its thing and then it's all tentacle. And so that would be what I would say there. Really nice though. Well done. That was Efren's, Logan's. We looked at Autumn's. We saw Gavin's on Monday. Oh, right. Michaelin got hers in. We haven't looked at Kai's yet. We looked at Natalie's. Okay. Okay, cool. Let's see that again. I think I need to see it a second time. Okay. What do you guys think happens? Well, there's a robot boat, right?
You know, it crashes into like a rock.
Okay, yeah. So what do you think happens between the robot arm and the tentacle? Or the tentacle beast here, or whatever?
Seems like they just say hi to each other.
They were saying hi?
I think so.
Maybe they even like direct them somewhere. I don't know. Like it seems like it's more of interpretation than like it's given out.
It's pretty abstract. I'm not sure. You know, like I feel like everybody's kind of like I thought there was maybe some sort of hypnotism happening here based on the sound design.
Look into my eyes.
Yeah,
To my big eye.
yeah, but yeah, because that's confusing because usually we would imagine the thing with the eyes doing the hypnosis, and so the other way around here seems weird. Yeah, and so whatever it is that you're trying to do here, Michaela, it'd be good to put that in next week's video as a way to sort of clarify this. But yeah, if it is like hypnosis or trance or there needs to be something else here. What could clarify that, you think?
Well, depending on which direction she's going for, if she's just making them say hi, the robot could like either wave back, or if it's being hypnotized, either the eye can change to, you know, the swirly, and like the robot kind of just like, hypnotized motion, you know, swaying or something similar like that. Or if it's like a robot that's trying to explore the ocean and it comes across, it could be like, instead of the eye just being a stagnant already out, could emerge and along with the tentacle, and it'd just be like, hi, and then the robot be confused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, those are all good options depending on what direction you're going to go. I mean, so amorphous, I'm not really sure what direction we're going here, but yeah, if it was a friendly interaction, yeah, waving and waving would be good. The water is one of the other ones here. Like, just throw the ocean deformer on this plane, and that's going to immediately help ground this as more of like a ocean tail to begin with. Because right now it's just like things are bobbing up and down, but it's really hard to tell. It doesn't typically read as ocean here. Yeah, I like the design here with the double pupil thing. That's kind of interesting, but and again, like I said before, it doesn't seem like there should be a whole lot of really any time where the tentacle is totally straight like this, right? We know that's our default T-pose, but you know, think about it like with humanoid characters. Would there be any scenes in your movie about human characters where the characters are like this? Really?
All of them.
All of them? Yeah, just
That's how normal humans are.
Mm-hmm.
right. We know it needs to be in that pose so that you can bind the rig, but it's not really a pose that you use in any other instance. So yeah, that I would, you know, the tentacle needs to be in a different position there. But yeah, the design of the robot boat arm is totally cool. This is definitely the best part so far, I think. Like, this is definitely a little bit different than a lot of the other designs, which is cool. But whatever it is that you're trying to do here is not super clear right now. So it'd be good. That would be good to clear up. And Kai's. Cool. Let's see that again. Okay, cool. Logan, your turn. What happens?
So the robot arm is floating into the water, and then a tentacle suddenly rises from the water, and there's a button. The robot decides to press the button, and I don't know, from how I interpreted it, it was like nothing really happens. The robot just like moves slowly in like awe as the tentacle just immediately pulls it into the water.
Yeah, I would say I'm with you. I mean, the best part is this part. The robot arm conjuring the tentacle.
I also like the music. Like I like how the music style like has those like bells. Like it has those like high bells as the tentacle rises. It makes it seem a little more magical as it just like rises in the water.
Yeah, so the music editing totally carried this here, like that part of it, and then the music break on the collapse of both of them at the end. That was also really well timed, right? And so, yeah, this is one of those instances where, like we were discussing with the ball, right? The design decisions at this point in terms of like the storytelling versus like the visceral music and heavy post-processing effects here, like this could either, you could either reduce the amount of post-processing effects and clear up the storytelling so that you would have something that's a much clearer narrative piece, or you could keep the heavy post-processing and then I think make it longer with more cuts of stuff, right? Where we start to veer more into music video territory, where it's like, you know, when you watch a music video, some of them are narrative, but another type of music video is like, what happened? I don't know, stuff like along with the music, and you know, it was cool. That this could be that, right? Because it is cool, right? The timing of their movement along with the music is compelling and interesting. And if it were a little bit longer and you just did more of it so that we were obviously like, so that we could be sure that like, wait, is there a story here that I just don't understand? Or we could just simply relieve ourselves of our pressure to try and understand your story if it's like, oh no, this is just like we're just on a mind expanding journey here. And, you know, things are going to happen that maybe don't make sense, but that's fine. Because like the quality of the image and what you're making here is really cool. But I feel like it's obscuring the narrative parts of it. And if you want to, it depends what directions you want to go with this. Do you want to divorce yourself from the narrative and make it more of like a strange robot arm tentacle music video? That's one of the ideas, you know, I was thinking of when I signed this to you guys. It was wondering if anyone's going to take it in that sort of direction. So one or the other, but the quality of animation on the tentacle is really great. And then, yeah, like I said, if you want it to be a little bit more narrative so that we understand what happened at the end, I feel like the post-processing is so heavy. Like you're doing this heavy dithering thing, and then there's also this bit depth reduction, pixelization thing. If you wanted it to vibe more with pixel art here, which is, the dithering suggests that, because this is like a retro style. But in order for it to sort of vibe with the more retro style, I would move the camera less, not have the camera animate. Because, when video games look like this, there were no animated cameras, right? Like just simply wasn't a thing to sort of have that control over that. And so that sort of parallaxing of stuff and everything kind of ruins the effect to some extent. If you want to totally commit to that. Yeah.
The style you mentioned, it reminds me of those games like there's retro 3D games like Resident Evil and other ones where like there's just like a sort of like it's sort of like a rendered background, but there's no like camera movement because it's simply like a rendered background, but there's like 3D characters like running throughout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the amount of dithering here is even like more retro. We're back to like, the computer only can display 256 colors.
Yeah.
This is like when I was playing Double Dragon on my mom's first home computer, which was quote unquote portable. I remember going to the store so she could do word processing on this thing, and the portable computer at the time was like about this wide, and then it was a big plastic box with a screen about this big on it, and it had a handle on it, which made it a portable computer. If you also spent a lot of time in the gym, right, you could theoretically transport this computer.
Everything's portable if you go to.
If you spend enough time in the gym, right. Yeah, you start to look at the world differently when you can pick up anything, right?
Is it like late 80s?
This would have been, yeah, would have been, 88-ish, yeah.
I love my portable couch.
Someday I can be able to get a portable house.
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, you got to get in those reps.
Get
You
the
drink it.
squats in.
Yeah, squats, protein drinks, all that stuff.
Steroids.
Get muscles bigger than my own body.
Okay. We looked at Natalie's before. That was the,
This is the classroom environment everyone online is missing.
Exactly.
I think Melissa's on the live stream.
Yeah.
She said hi at least. Okay, so we got the hair stuff. That's going to be one thing. The other thing is that we do want to, I know everybody wants to use the suit. We're going to use the suit next week. Motion, capture. We need to use some data. Melissa says, don't worry, I didn't read any strange energy in any of the other projects. Yeah, I mean, they were all a little strange, I thought. We need to work with the mocap clips. Essentially, this is recording the rotation values for each bone. So all FK, the motion capture clips, right? IK is for us, the animators. So we can move a hand and have the arm move and that stuff. When you're recording it, depending on the fidelity of the capture and everything, you have really only one object with moving position, and that's going to be the main pelvis. And then everything else is going to be recorded rotational information. So with that in mind, let's look at how to handle some of this stuff once the clips are in there. So we're going to use some clips off of Mixamo here first. So have we used that in this class at all or no? Okay, let me to do more than that. So this is owned by Adobe, so you sign in with your Adobe login. Okay, there we go. And so this is one of those things that was, I don't know when this came on the scene, 7-ish years ago. I'd have to look. And they made a pretty big splash in terms of like having a bunch of motion capture and then a bunch of sort of stock characters. And just in the web interface here, you can combine any of the characters with any of the animations. So, for instance, we could pick this character and then choose an animation. The design of the characters is, they're all bipeds, and they're all essentially rigged to the same skeleton. And so the skeleton is this Mixamo standard. Our motion capture rig records to that standard. And so then mixing between recorded ones and preset ones is just the same. Now, the problem is each character can be slightly different with slightly different proportions and slightly different physiology. And so some of these animations have a few controls over here in terms of like, almost all of them have character arm space. So if you need to, you could move the arms out so that they're not intersecting with the character and everything. And in terms of just using this as is in Blender, you would hit download, we get the FBX, we would say with skin, and download that. Meanwhile, on Blender, if we go to downloads, here we are. I can drag this in. Say, make sure animation is checked, obviously. I think it's checked by default. And just hitting play, there we go. We have the character in there. So importing one character with an animation is kind of easy peasy. They've changed some things so that for this character, all of the textures came in no problem, which is good. And if we were to look at this in the timeline here, under here. Yeah, so this is what motion capture information looks like. It's exactly what it says it is. You're recording the rotational information of all these different bones. In order to capture the information, you need to record it once a frame. And so that's the fundamental trade-off of this kind of animation. So mocap, high fidelity, meaning there's a lot of detail and nuance in it. The downside is it's not really, there's no real keyframes in the way that we think of keyframes. Right? Keyframes are ideally not every frame, right? This is really just recorded information. So when you just do something, record it, or you just have, I just need a background character that's going to be standing there doing a looping idle. I have this character, I have this mocap, it's already rigged, drag and drop, you're done, right? So those kind of use cases, it's great and super low friction. However, when you start to do a couple things, you're like, okay, that's kind of what I want, but then I need to edit it. I'd rather have them wave while they're in between being in idle. Okay, well then now we need to adjust some things. One of the first things is this issue here. It's very high fidelity. There's tons of keyframes. One of the things you can do if you need to edit the existing clip is keyframe reduction, right? And so this is an algorithm that essentially takes all of the curvature information, which is being recorded each frame like this, and then does like a reverse, it's probably like an FFT analysis kind of thing, to figure out where it changes and tries to turn it into something with less keyframes that could be adjustable, right? When the information is this dense, it's very accurate, it's very nuanced, but it's not very editable. And so how can we turn it into something that's editable? Via keyframe reduction, right? Okay, so let's look at this one. Let's give ourselves some more time. I don't know, 10 frames. There we go. Okay, so we like this, but we want her to just move her head down and back even more than it is now, right? So essentially we want to rotate this joint even more. Let's look at some of this stuff. So first of all, let's go ahead and put this in front. When I'm on the armature here, in object mode, let's go to pose mode. There we go. And yeah, so it's a lot of the rotation. Let's look at this. Let's look at the graph editor. Looks like a straight line because it's just super smushed data. That's where this, remember this normalize here, this is the Blender equivalent of like make it fill up the entire area so you can tell what's happening. And so if you press that, then you can see. And so here we can see the deal on what's happening here, right? So this is it rotating back and back forward. Here it goes down, right? And so we can clearly see which one's which. The problem is, like, let's say we wanted to have it rotate even more at the beginning here, right? And so we would need to run that keyframe reduction. which is command is actually, let's grab this one. I forget what they call this command. Let me see here. I think this might be one of those sidebar ones. Active keyframe, reduce keyframe. Either that or it's an add-on. This might not be an add-on. It is an add-on. That's why I was missing it. Preferences. There we go. Okay. It is an add-on. That's why I was not there. It's an extension. Simplify Curves Plus is the one you need. Okay. And so this does exactly what it says it does. Control Z here, right? So this information is too dense to change. I grab all of it, A, channel, simplify, F curve, and it gives me, you have to open this little menu down here. And so as you drag this up, it's doing exactly what I was saying. It's trying to, see how as I'm holding down Shift and dragging, it's trying to make the curves simpler with less keyframes on them so that they would be theoretically editable. Right, or more editable, right? And so now for something like this, right, if I were to look at just this curve here, we're in a place where even if I were to delete a few keyframes here, right, so doing my own manual keyframe reduction, right, I could get this down to the point where, okay, like now there's a keyframe here, there's a keyframe here, there's a keyframe here, and now this is something where I could dial in this in order to edit said motion. All right, so simplify curves is their keyframe reduction. And so this, major tool in order to do any editing of motion capture data, right? Because then you have stuff that looks like actual editable animation that you can theoretically adjust at that point, right? But again, if we were to look at, if we look at just the scale, no scale information, location, these are all flat in the middle. Everything, all the important stuff is rotation because everything is FK, right? It's just recorded the rotation of all of the different parts. If I were to grab any bone here, the only one that is going to have more information here is our pelvis, the hips in the Mixamo rig, okay? The hips, so I can't remember off the top of the head, was it pelvis or hips in Rigify? I think it was, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Anyways, for Mixamo skeleton, the hips are the top of the chain, which you can see over here, right? And so this moves, everything else just rotates, okay? And so there we see way more information on this one. And we could do the same kind of thing. If we got this channel, simplify F curves, hold down shift. This is very touchy. And so you want to be careful here not to drag this so far that you see the major contour of the line changing, right? That means, like, look at this green one here, whatever. There we go. The Y rotation on the hips, right? We see it goes down and back up. If I keep dragging that simplify value here, it would start to destroy that curvature there. So can we get Control L? How can we get one at a time? Can we just select this one? Because that doesn't do it. A just gives me all of them. If I go to only show selected, yeah, so if you just looked at one of them, you'd be able to isolate them if you had to run it individually there. But this is what makes things just sort of editable at this point. Okay, so reduce, simplify, make sure you have the add-on. That allows you to edit what's going on with Mixamo. Now, let's take this a step further, where the Mixamo rig, let's go ahead and save this as an example, file, save as. There we go. Okay, the other advantage is here is that, yeah, you could take the same character, and because all of the characters here that are available and also ones that we would upload are getting essentially bound to the exact same rig, it allows you to use any of the animations with any of the characters and then also interpolate between animations. And so, for instance, she's going to throw up her arms, and then dance capoeira. And so now, as one does, actually capoeira is pretty, you're covering a lot of ground there. Let's do a more boring dance, right? So these are searchable here. There's a lot of stuff. This is when this first came online, it was really, there was not like a freely available tool like this. And then Adobe promptly bought it, and hasn't done anything with it in the entire time they've owned it, which is, I mean, they haven't taken it offline, which I guess is better than what happens with a lot of Adobe tools, but, or things they buy. But especially for as useful a thing as it is, yeah, I just wish it got more interest from that huge company with tons of resources. Okay, so we have a second clip here, right? This dancing clip. Let's get the arm space a little bit bigger so that the hands don't go through the body there at the end. Okay, that's good. And so now we'll go to download, but we don't need to download the skin again. We already, if we're gonna have multiple clips on the same character, we just need essentially all the rotational information for the bones. We don't need the bindings. That's already there, okay? So here, in fact, you know what, I should probably download, someone has probably done this, downloaded all of these in the event that they ever go offline so that we have our own repository of them. Anyways, maybe a summer project. Let's download this.
So you're downloading it as 30 frames per second?
Mm-hmm.
Is most mocap data 30 frames per second, or?
Yeah, I think that Darsu captures it that. I don't know if there's any more detail in the 60 FPS here. Regardless, a lot of times we're rendering the movie at 24 frames per second. So this isn't a super huge issue, especially because if you're gonna edit it, you're gonna run the simplify. And then even if you're not, a lot of times we're gonna smush or expand it to try and speed it up or slow it down. And so like the frame rate of the animation is just sort of not all that critical, right? If you're gonna slow it way down, right, into like some sort of like bullet time kind of thing, then yeah, I would pull down the 60 FPS so that when I stretched it, I would have more. But besides that, it just doesn't end up being that big of a deal, right? Because you can smush it or you can expand it, and within that amount of time, it's fine. As long as you know you're still rendering your project at 24 FPS, the standard, then that's not a huge deal. Okay, so we've got this now. Let's come back, and before we import that one, let's go back to the dope sheet, and then select the armature, and rewind, and go to the action editor. And so here, this is the action for whatever it is that I imported the first time, and we'll call this exasperation. There we go. So that action has a name. Now we need to import the other clip, which is here, wave hip hop dance. And so I can drag that in. And when I import this one, if I were to, you see it comes in as a separate, armature. This is the one we imported first. You see that the second one we imported here is just the bones, right? No skin. And this one is much, much, much longer. There's a ton of data here on all of this. And if we select this and we're still in the action editor here, let's rename this action as well to dance, and then these keyframes in this action are in the project. And so even if you delete the armature and we come back up to our first character in here, and I went over to the action editor here, you see that when Blender imports it, it saves the animation sequence as an action, and it's still there, right? Even if the object itself is not. This, Blender files are really just like this big collection of stuff, and you can see a bunch of that if you go to the Blender file inspector over here. It shows you all of the things that are in different sections. I've had to come over here to do some other like heavy lifting kind of stuff in terms of like getting data from one project to another in bulk or something. And so everything is, all the different parts of the Blender project are accessible in that view. Most of the time it's just here, or one that we're used to. Okay, so that's good. Now, how can this, it's there as a clip, but it's not doing anything. Do I have the motion blur on? That's usually what's responsible for that flickering. I'm just going to turn that off for now. Okay, and so now that's better. Great. Okay, so we talked about editing a single clip. Now, multiple clips, right? This is also the part of the innate value proposition of working with motion capture is like, I can run, I can punch, and then I want to be able to just run, then punch. So that's just put those two clips together, right? If all of the motion capture is coming from the same format, right, which all of this is, it's all in the Mixamo format, then these things are not totally seamless, but doable. When you have clips that are on different skeletons, then we're in a world of doing retargeting, which gets really, really irritating in terms of trying to make one thing work with the other. But we're not going to do that. We're going to keep on the Mixamo silo. And so we have multiple clips. We can edit between these clips in the NLE in Blender, which is the non-linear editor, which instead of working, didn't we work with this once before? I don't think so. Yeah, non-linear editor. Instead of working with individual keyframes, you're working with individual clips, and these clips can then be blended. And so this is much more like working on the Premiere timeline or any music DAW, where we have pieces of audio on a timeline, and you can sort of blend them together and whatnot. And all of that blending works because all of the skeletons have the exact same number of bones, and they can easily essentially just fade every track, right? The neck bone from one track fades with the neck bone from another track. So let's look at that. We'll come over here, back to the dope sheet, then go to the non-linear animation editor, which is that one right there. And here we have the armature with the exasperation. The interface in this is not super. There's a couple gotchas, and once you get past those, then it works like one would hope. It doesn't work like you would want out of the box, which is a little frustrating. I'm going to give myself a little bit more time. Especially because that dance clip is so long. And so now I'll come back to nonlinear animation and zoom out a little bit. Okay. And so here we can see this. This is the clip on the timeline. And so one would hope that you'd be able to click and move this and move it like a clip, and you cannot. Because it hasn't been the Blender word here is push down into the stack. And so I think this terminology is terrible. Like, it hasn't been, entered into the NLA stack. And so you need to press this button in order to essentially just start doing anything here. Okay, so this button right here. Once I do that, you'll see that now it becomes like a clip and it lights up. And so now you could move it on the timeline and it functions more like one would expect as a clip to do stuff here. Okay, that's good. So that's the first gotcha. Now that that's there, what we're going to be able to do is start to layer other actions here and then have our character, just by simply sliding them back and forth, do one thing, then do another thing, then come back and do the other thing if we want, whatever it is. One of the things that you want to do often is repeat an action, right? Especially if you have, like an NPC sitting there just idling over and over. You just want them to just really just continue idling. And so if you select the clip, that is under here. So you have to have the clip selected, then all this stuff appears, and then over here under action clip, if you unfold, there is the repeat. And so if you start to extend that out, now it extends the clip, and you'll see that she'll just repeat the animation. The scale is going to be the overall timing of it. If you wanted to smush it so that it happened faster, and if you wanted it to repeat more, it could. Okay, makes sense so far? The big gotcha is that push down button, right? Where it shows you, it really shouldn't show you, I don't know, I don't understand the whole architecture of what they're trying to do with this window enough to understand why you need to push that button. Because it doesn't seem to me like there's any instance in which you would not want that button pushed. And so why it isn't just the state of it, I'm not sure. But anyways, you got to push the button. So push the button. That's good. Let's get our other clip. So with this selected, I need to go to Add and then Action. Or I guess I suppose Shift A is does that work here? Yeah, Shift A. And you see, I get my other action. So this is why we went to the action editor as soon as we drug that in, and we renamed it Dance. Otherwise, as we drag in more and more clips, every clip here is going to say something like Mixamo animation number something, which is just not, easy to know what's happening. And so if I click Dance, there it adds it. It adds it to the playhead. And so now here's that one. Actually, yeah, so this is the other big gotcha. Now, what's the deal? Now my character doesn't do anything. The other one is not happening. And now it does the dance. This is because what we need to do is cross fade between these. Instead of, this is the other confusing thing. It should just play this one, but it doesn't. It's as if this is a layer, and even though it's over here in time, it's still on top here. And so essentially it's like covering up that clip. So you need to select the next clip up, and the super important but really easy to miss, blend in and out parameters, okay? And so if blend in equals 0, it will cover up the clip below. If I were on the Blender team, I would say the default for this should be like 0.001. That way, when you bring it in, it still plays the other clip, and you would obviously be able to move things left and right like one would hope. But that's not the case. Anyways, we'll do that now. And so if I take this and just shift it in, just make it not 0. Now, you see immediately, now we play the other stuff. And then when we get to this one, there we go. we start doing this. Now, for instance, here, we can slide this over, so they're on top of each other, and now the blend in can actually do some blending. And you do get the visual representation of this here, right? So that's the fade in. Anyone who's ever done any sort of audio stuff on a timeline, right, this is exactly how they visualize audio fading in and out in all of them, Pro Tools, Ableton, everything. And so here, now, here, we don't get that jerk when we slip from one clip to the next, because as this clip is playing, it just fades between the the one motion capture clip to the other motion capture clip. We can make it even longer here. It's more of a blend, like this, and see how that looks. Just start breakdancing? Yeah.
I would see, Umbrella Academy.
From what?
Umbrella Academy.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Is it good?
Starts off good.
Your delay in answering answered the question.
Is all the answer he needs.
We've not seen the last
When I ask someone, "Is that good?" and then there's a lot of silence, it's like okay, well you don't need to say anything. It's like superpower school, right? Like that's the
like a family,
okay.
but they all stopped being superheroes.
Oh, okay. Is it part of some other universe, like of things?
Yes, same show.
Oh, okay.
It starts getting bad.
So super cool, right? That you can, right? Because now I could even, make it even longer and get this, very long transition.
I know in Premiere you're able to drag the transition. Are you able to do that on this?
I don't think you can do that. No, I can't. You can just sort of click on the clip here. This is, as far as I know, this is one of the windows in Blender that's long in the tooth. I think this was certainly in the program before the massive amount of development that's happened since the Blender Foundation. And so I imagine this one is, I hope it's on the list to get retargeted here and reconfigured, like with just a few things. This could be a lot less frustrating, at least. Yeah, because you just sort of move them around, and then you got to come over here with some of these cryptic controls in order to do things that are patently obvious. Yeah, okay, so there's that. Cool. Let's bring in, let's shorten this clip. I think I can do this. This is a really long clip. Yeah, there we go. Right, so again, you can't, yeah, it doesn't seem to be doing much of that. Anyways, this, you can shorten it using these up here from start to end, right? So now we just have this. And then we'll do a jump. So let's come back and find a jump. Again, this character, we gotta change the arm space a little bit. Okay, that's good. And again, we can download and without skin and bring that in. And then over here, let's come back to dope sheet, action editor, then import the clip. There we go. And rename this clip to jump. And then just get rid of the other armature and come back and select the original armature and go back over to the nonlinear editor. And then again, I think the other gotcha here I would run into, yeah. So if you don't have either clip selected and you go to add action, it throws an error. And so you need to have something selected, then add action, and we get this one here. Why is that not on a new? Add track, there we go. Add action, jump, there we go. And so now I'll move this over. Again, we run into that thing where like, well, why did all my other animations stop? You got to fade in the jump. What if I click this? Okay. So if you click this, then it'll auto fade in and fade out. Does it change that as you're moving it? Oh yeah, that's interesting. This is more like hidden Blender interface, where it's like, no way you could possibly know that. Right, so if this is clicked, then it automatically fades in, and the fade in, now I can't control the fade in. How's the fade in controlled? It's controlled by just simply overlapping it. And you see that the fade in is the entire time of the overlap. So if you wanted to have more control, you would unclick that and then make sure that you have some sort of fade in order to control the time, right? So one or the other there. And then here, right, so now we look at everything all together. Here's the slower transition to the dance move. And then as we're dancing, there we go. We jumped, right? And then we could go back to dance, I think. If we come in here and select add action dance. I've always been putting these on a separate track. It just seems easier to manage. I can't think about why you would want... Anyway, so here, let's say I wanted the second half of this dance. So I'll take trim the start part here. And so it's more like, yeah, this part. And then I'll overlap this and fade it in like so. And now we'll dance. And then we'll go to the jump. And then continue dancing. So really, really intricate, unending, like line dance sequencing of stuff. Let's save that. So, nonlinear editor. Cool, right? And this, like the value proposition here, I think is clear. Where things get squirrely is a lot of the big things are the transitioning here with the feet on specific clips, which can, if we're seeing the feet, be an issue. Let's look at, what was the other, oh yeah, over here. The animation modifiers There's a couple that are kind of interesting here. So if you switch to that tab, these are like, like the modifiers over here, but for keyframes. The one that's obviously useful is stepped interpolation. This could be super useful for stop motion look, where especially sort of Spider-Verse style, where maybe different characters are moving at different frame rates. And so this is a way to step down their interpolation. And so if I go to stepped and then turn up step size a bunch to maybe like 6, now watch this. Right, so it's just like sampling every X number of frames. And so that's super useful. I like that one a lot. The other ones, what else did I use here? Oh yeah, I thought noise, let's put in the noise here. By default, it just gets really weird.
I have no idea.
What if we just did a little bit of it? Like you just were a little strange. I thought that might be. And the scale. There we go. It's doing it to the entire clip. I don't know if there'd be a way to restrict it to just the rotational values and not that one scale value, because it does do that, but so anyways, if you turn down the strength and then turn up the scale so that the scale in this case is the scale of the wave, and so that sort of just makes the waves bigger, and like that was weird in an interesting way. As opposed to just the jittery, like really jittery, strange way. Yeah, so it's like adding noise to, we get noise on the scale of the keyframes. If we went back, right, because noise on all of the rotation information, I think could be interesting in that would just be more interesting for the animation, but combined with the scale keyframes makes it extra weird because you're like shrinking and growing all the time. And I think that would be doable if you just eliminated that, but there's so many we went to the dance one. We look for scale. Nope. Oh, it doesn't search the parameters, it just searches the names. Okay, it does give me all the parameters. What if I deleted all of those keyframes? We still get everything else. And so now back in the NLE, I'm going to turn the strength way up.
I call this the exorcism.
Yeah. So these are a lot of techniques they could use for that horror job you got hired for to make a bunch of possessed ring-like looking characters. Yeah, so she isn't scaling anymore because I went back and deleted all of the scale keyframes, right? So again, one of those instances where there's just too much info in the mocap. The scale keyframes, there were keyframes there, so they were getting changed by this modifier, but they were all one, like nothing changed. And so if it doesn't have a keyframe, it doesn't get changed by the modifier there. Yeah, but those were the two. The other ones, I didn't really see any noise, limits, envelope, built-in function. Those are all like sinusoidal things. Yeah, but the step interpolation and the noise, perhaps, but definitely the step interpolation works on this. Okay, so we've got multiple clips, and we're able to bring those in. The other part of Mixamo here is that you could bind the Mixamo skeleton to any mesh, and you could bind it the normal way, right? If you brought the Mixamo skeleton into Blender and bound it the same way that we've been binding everything. The other thing that is on the tool, web-based tool here, is that there is web-based binding. So I did a quick example of this in 200 Monday. If we look at, let me find that character. Okay, so in like, I made this in like 5 minutes or something, just to sort of, like you could block something out and smooth it out and sculpting and, making some sort of, one of the games is just sort of like this minimalist, futuristic environment, and this is, kind of like an alien, kind of like a energy being, just silhouette-ish kind of character. And so I grab this, it's in the T pose, that's key. And so if we export this as an FBX, selected here, there's no animation on this right now. There's no bones on this, it's just the mesh. And back to here, you can say upload character. And so here, you can provide your own mesh and then map all of the Mixamo animations onto it once it gets bound. The closer your character is to regular biped proportions, the better this works, okay? If your character's got like a giant tail or like huge weird ears, if it had small weird ears, that's probably fine. But like anything that's gonna differentiate substantially from humanish proportions, it, the successfulness of this is gonna go down. But for those kind of things, it is pretty great. And so here, the binding process is just simply a matter of positioning each of these controllers. These will become the bones. And having the knee bend is also critical here, right? Like we've talked about, otherwise the IK construction of this whole thing is not great. And so the other thing here is the skeleton. And so we've been using just no fingers for now. I mean, you understand when you add fingers, there's like a ton more. The hands are complex. And that all looks good. Next. It's doing both the binding and the weighting here with a bunch of automatic, bind with automatic weights. Same thing. But it's binding it to the Mixamo skeleton that's already designed to work with all of these motion capture clips because they're all captured with that. And RSuit captures it with that format as well. There we go. Right, and so it gives you like a test animation where the character's moving its hips and everything to, check. And so the other thing that doesn't work super well here is, fat characters where, the sides of the character are going to leak more towards the arms. You end up with situations, they're not uncorrectable. You'd have to bring them back into Blender and probably adjust some of the weight painting at that point, right? You could probably make a lot of things work, but it would just depend on the situation. Anyways, this character is pretty standard and it works. And so now if I say next, now it's using my character and I can choose any capoeira based movement on my character. Once we start getting into the handstand stuff, you see it takes a little bit more work there.
Yeah.
Overdrive is constantly it means kind of the speed. Let's make some more arm space. Like slouch slider. Here, let's do the capoeira without the handstand. This is how I do. Oh no, there's still a handstand. Okay, is there one without a handstand? Yeah, that looks more my speed. I need to get really warmed up before I do all the flipping stuff. And so now download. In this case, we just rigged a new character, so we'll bring it down with the skin. And so that using the tool like that is super, super useful. And there's this, because this, gained so much, this tool people used a lot. There's a lot, pretty much, There's a lot of other databases and motion capture databases. Let me see. That are in that same format. And when everything's in the same format, all of the animations are on the exact same skeleton. Blending between clips, everything like this is easy peasy and super fast and useful. It's when you're going between, trying to get things from one format to another, where things start to, just really gets into the conversion, and there can be a lot of issues there with the conversion that just really eat up a lot of time. But we can record some of our own clips here in addition to what I think is free. Yeah, so we got the suit just as a lot of this was changing. And so there are two, at the base level, there's two ways to do this. One is you have what's like an accelerometer built into the suit, which is the suit we have. The accelerometer is, like this tiny piece of hardware that's like in your phone, which is how the phone knows like how it's spinning, right? And that, is essentially an accelerometer for each bone, more or less, and no cameras, right? And so that can be great because there's no cameras, so you don't have to deal with all the camera stuff, which can be things like occlusion and focal length and all of these other camera issues that pop up when you do it the other way, which is with cameras, right? The ones that we see online where, it's Josh Brolin as Thanos in the suit with all the ping pong balls in the thing. And there's not so many ping pong balls in his, but
A lot of markings.
what?
A lot of like markings on the suit.
Yeah, right. And so this, there's probably several redundant things here, but all of this is because there's cameras, and the you can do it with one camera, but one camera has pretty bad occlusion problems, right? If you turn to the side, then the camera knows exactly what this hand is doing, but has no idea what this hand is doing, right? So multiple cameras, right? And then multiple cameras allow you to triangulate what's happening, doing a bunch of math that I don't understand to sort of stitch it all together. One from one angle, one from another angle, a bunch of matrix math stuff. And so those are the two, competing technologies there. Do we use cameras or do we use the accelerometers? And when we got the suit right before the pandemic, the accelerometer thing was taking off because you didn't have to worry about all the camera stuff, and it was getting super affordable. And now, with the machine learning stuff that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, the camera stuff is starting to make more sense again, because the occlusion stuff for many sort of very simple things, right? Not doing like Donnie Yen level kung fu, right? For doing like waving, standing around, drinking coffee, right? Those kind of things. They've been able to train a lot of machine learning algorithms to fill in the blanks, because, turns out when you're drinking coffee with your right hand, your left hand isn't really doing much, right? And AI can fill in those blanks pretty well. And so now, even with less resources, I've seen people do some pretty remarkable things just using the Rococo has an app that's specifically for the suit, And then it also has an app for doing motion capture without the suit, just on your phone, right? Where it records you, crunches all the data, and then sends it down as any of the previously mentioned motions. And so let's look. Yeah, so especially here, it looks like their thing is 2. So it'd be great to do a compare and contrast next week. We'll try it with both methods and see what's what there with the 2 cameras or with the accelerometers. The problem with the accelerometers, or the thing that makes it not quite as nice as one would hope, is that the Wi-Fi networking part of it is pretty heavy, because it needs to send a bunch of stuff over Wi-Fi and needs to have its own network, and so there needs to be a separate router and a bunch of that kind of stuff, which isn't terrible at home. Here at school, we can't use the Wi-Fi that we have because, you know, it's like locked down and it's possible to send other junk over it, and it's one thing after another. But having your own separate router, then we have a router for it, so it works. Anyways, the only problem, the accelerometer rotational, the accelerometer FK data is really great. It's really good. The problem is the accelerometer IK data about like where does the pelvis move in space, or did your feet end up at a different elevation, is less great. And so that's one part of it that's not so great, that they've addressed with other pieces of hardware and other pieces of software. So it depends there. And so all the facial motion capture stuff has been, you know, camera, because we just shoot the camera at the face, then we can track all the dots and put that on the face. Hence all of those kind of rigs for these kind of things. Sound good? Okay, so we're making hair this week. We're all going to the film screening on Sunday at, is it 1, isn't it? At 1? At the library. At the library, right? Not the GCC library, the Glendale Library, right? We usually do this in our Performing Arts Center, but that caught fire last summer and is under reconstruction. And so now we're doing it at the Glendale Library, which is just north of school, just right, it's on 59th, just between Olive and Peoria. Everybody with me there? In fact, let's just look at it.
Oh, is it that has like the veteran memorial with like the metal tree?
Yeah, right out in front. Yeah. There we go. In the library. And the doors over there. Okay, so again, not the GCC library, the Glendale Library. They have a screening room, and that's where we're going to have the show on Sunday at 1. 1 o'clock on Sunday. What is it, the 28th? 7th? Sound good? Okay.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
For the nonlinear editor, are you able to export that to the normal timeline? Or is it its own separate thing?
It's its own separate thing. I mean, what would you want to do on the normal timeline?
Add it to my animation. Like if I have a scene where like a background character is dancing, but like the main character's like I'm manually editing.
Each, like the character with mocap, like that character, like it's per object or per armature. So like all of this is on this armature, right? And so it's totally separate. If you added another armature that you had controls on and were using, it would be not, and you didn't come over to the nonlinear editor, you would be able to do whatever you would want with it there.
So how do I get this character to dance in the scene?
This one?
Yeah.
I mean, it is dancing in the scene.
Well, and like if I add it to my robot versus tentacle animation.
I mean, you would just copy this character and paste it into, let's see, Control C, or let's create the hierarchy. And we'll go to my other one. Control V. She's small, so this got even weirder. There you go. This is not where I thought we'd end up today, but here we are. Yeah, so like the nonlinear editor is like per object, per armature.
So it'll still show up on the timeline.
Yeah, I mean
Okay.
the Yeah, I mean, you don't have direct access to those keyframes here.
But at least like you could see the character.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Second question, are we going to be doing like lip syncing next week?
Yeah, we'll rig the face and do some lip sync.
Okay.
And then does anyone, okay, yeah, let's leave it there. Okay. Awesome, sound good?